Hello, thank you for joining us. How many of you just came from the session with Eric? Okay.
Hello.
We're going to talk more exciting things on data, but very glad that you're here. Welcome to Denver Startup Week. This is our 13th year of the week, and just excited to see the innovation, the creativity, the networking that happens during this week. So yes, I hope you learn a lot from these leaders on stage, but also just from the people sitting next to you and from happy hour after this. So please stay, enjoy your time. And I'm thrilled to introduce this session on data strategies, specifically with Danny Fleming, Bill Sherby, and Val Young. So take it away.
Perfect. Thanks, Megan. Good afternoon, everyone. As Megan said, my name is Danny Fleming. I'm a strategy and operations senior consultant with Slalom Consulting Denver. With over 10 years of experience transforming operating models and in driving impactful change, I specialize in helping organizations leverage technology and data to unlock their growth. I'm really excited to moderate today's panel, Data Strategies to Shatter Your Growth Ceiling, where we're going to dive into some actionable insights on how early stage companies can use data to drive actionable insights, fuel growth, and set a foundation for long-term success. So with that, I'd like to welcome our panelists here, Bill Sherby and Val Young. Thanks for joining us. We'd love just to hear a little bit about you both. Just if you don't mind telling us about your role, your companies, and how specifically your roles interrelate with data. Bill, I'll start with you.
Okay, great. So I'm Bill Sherby. I'm the SVP of Product Technology and Analytics at Havenly. I've been at Havenly for about 8 years now. Moved here from San Francisco back then to take on the head of analytics role at Havenly. That's how I came into the company, and I've expanded my scope since then. When I came in there, my charter was essentially to do just this, implement a data strategy, right? Like make the company data driven and make everyone on the team make smarter decisions faster.
Thanks, Val. Val?
Cool. Hi, I'm Val Young. I am VP and Head of Growth at Sondermind, which is a mental and behavioral health tech company based here in Denver. I also moved from San Francisco to Denver a couple years ago.
Common trend.
Yeah, I love it here. I started at Sondermind about 3.5 years ago, and I actually started on the analytics team. And I ran the analytics, data science, data engineering teams for a while, and then shifted into more strategy, biz ops, that type of role, and now sitting over growth, which means something different, obviously, at every company. For us, I have the provider recruitment and sales, so all of the sort of provider group growth. I have our marketing team, which obviously is driving our client generation engine, and then market expansion and our psychiatry business. So I think I sort of sit on the opposite side of the fence from Bill in a lot of ways, which is I'm really working closely with our analytics team as well as sort of self-serving my own data to think about what matters and what are the metrics that I care about when I'm going to try to pull different growth levers and kind of unlock the next stage of growth for us. I feel like I have a nice advantage having sat over analytics for a while, but I really come at it from the business side now, which is great.
Thanks for that, Val. Thanks, Bill, too. Like how we have the spectrum here. So just to kick things off, how do you each view the role of data in your company? Specifically, how does your organization use data to fuel growth and drive strategic decisions? Let's start.
Sure. Yeah, so Sondermind is an incredibly data-driven company. Sometimes arguably even like too data-driven. And I think the interesting thing in startups and in healthcare too is, one, you're making imperfect decisions all the time, and then with healthcare things take a really long time, and sometimes when you're really data driven it's frustrating because you want to like do something, see the data, make a decision. But we have a really strong underlying sort of data decision making culture, which is great. For me, I think it's probably better to think by way of example. Right now, we're turning a lot more states on, and we're putting a ton more kind of pieces of the country on the map and available for us, both for our therapy business and for our psychiatry business, going from 16 states to 50 states. Within like that range of options, we have to make kind of weekly decisions around where we're going to actually deploy spend, really try to drive growth versus just sort of let something sit passively? What are the levers that we're going to pull? Where are we sort of seeing data that indicates that we're being pulled into a market, right? There's like sort of interest there, or we're getting really good feedback on our early direct-to-consumer paid marketing spend, and that's giving us an indication that there's like an opportunity to push in, versus where do we have an underlying set of data that tells us that like this is a really good market to go push into, and that may not be our internal data. It might be external data. It might be competitive data, whatever else. So I think for us, and for me in particular in my job, I'm continually balancing where do I spend my time and attention, where do I put company resources to, why do I do this initiative over this initiative, over this one, and that is always driven by the data that supports it, and the strength and the confidence in that data, I would say.
Thanks for that, Val.
Echoing a lot of things you just said, but just to expand on how we do it at Havenly. Havenly, for those of you who don't know what we are, because I forgot to add that part to my intro, we started as an interior design company, mostly about bringing interior design to the masses, better access to an interior designer through working online with an interior designer that isn't in your home at a much more affordable cost. And since then, we've been essentially expanding the scope of the company. We've been going fully integrated, acquiring some furniture brands along the way. We're currently acquiring our 6th brand right now. And essentially the way we do all of those decisions is really with data, but like having access to data is one thing, but knowing what really matters to the decision you're making is really where like we focus, and it's about creating the framework up front about understanding what your business model is, where you're going, where you're headed towards, and making sure that we're putting the right structure in place and assessing which metrics are going to build up to that ultimate thing, which in our case, in most business cases, is growing revenue, continuous growth of revenue and losing less money or making money, right? So but you're not just measuring towards that, right? We're not just like sitting down like, all right, where are we making money? It's more so about what are the levels down from that are the drivers that make that money, and that's where we plan our business around, and we try to collect as much data around the things that are driving those levers as possible to continue to hone in on our understanding and assumptions about what's driving that. And that's really what it boils down to is updating our understanding and assumptions about what's gonna do the next thing for us. So sometimes we have the data for that. Sometimes we have it, but it doesn't tell us an extremely clear story, and actually that's most of the time. But if we don't have the data, that doesn't mean we aren't being data-driven in that sense. We essentially use our understanding of the levers of the business and then make assumptions, write them down, write our own data down about what those assumptions could be, and then pressure test them with each other and say, like, what if this one isn't true? What happens? And then that's where we essentially make that a data-driven process about, now let's go get information about what would tell us whether that's true or not true. Or if this isn't true, what risk do we have? Do we need to take the time to go to get the data to make that decision? Because that's where, like you brought up, do we spend too much time using data to make decisions? There is analysis paralysis. You'll never have complete certainty over the decision you're making, even with lots of data, because data is messy. So it's really just about de-risking every decision you make, or at least understanding the risk first to decide if you need to de-risk it more.
Well, like how you just outlined an approach of what I heard of how you handle gaps in data, how you handle a lot of like that gut decision making of, a lot of early stage companies, you don't have all of the data that you might need. There are a lot of gaps, and there's really that balance between how do you make decisions based on data, but also with your gut instinct. So Val, I'm curious, how do you go about that with Sondermind? Like if you do have gaps in your data, do you make similar assumptions like Bill's outlining and do some risk analysis, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things, whether you sit on the analytics and data side of the house or whether you sit on the growth side of the house, is having clarity around your confidence in the data that's driving the decision. And what we do when we have gaps or when it's imperfect, is we really try to pause and say, like, what is our confidence level in this? You know, A, B, C, D, E, F, basically, right? Like, how big of a leap are we making based on the gaps that we have here? And then, how important is this decision that we're making? And is it a one-way door or a two-way door? And I think if you can frame up those three questions, it's like, if the gap is small and the decision is not that important and you could reverse it if it's wrong, great. Like, just do it. Don't even spend any more time. You know, honestly, like, your gut instinct is there. There's a little bit of data that points you in the right direction. Like, go do that thing. You are in those situations probably better off to do it and get it wrong and learn from that and then course correct than to spend 2 or 3 more weeks like revving on like finding the perfect set of data that gives you full confidence.
If I might add one thing, it's also like, how much will it cost you to know if you should walk back through the door? So like, how long will, like, how much is going to cost you either in terms of effort to do the thing or opportunity cost of, if it goes wrong, you'll lose a bunch of money.
Totally. And there can be some inertia in a business of like, ooh, let's just like wait a little bit more. Like, let's get a little bit more data before we make a decision. And I do think that that cost benefit of like, how much longer do we wait and what do we lose with that waiting process versus how much do we risk if we just go for it? And I think the places where you really need to pause and say, how can I get more data to make a better informed decision to have higher confidence, is when the gap is big, the decision is big, it's a one-way door. You know what I mean? Like, those are the types of places where I think even startups that are moving really fast are well served to pause and figure out if there's a way to de-risk it. But a lot of what I do, even for us at Sondermind, being sort of growth stage, like late Series C, and decently big revenue numbers that we're talking about, like, day in and day out, I can make lots of decisions with imperfect data, and the company is better off for having done it a little bit imperfectly, but having like moved the ball down the field a little bit.
Yeah, and I think to continue to spitball on that every decision you make is either informed by data or should be structured in a way that you're gathering data to decide if you keep doing that thing or if you should do something different. So like in your world, you're constantly placing a bunch of bets on where you're acquiring customers, how you're retaining them, et cetera. And you're not gonna just one day say, complete strategy shift, let me put all my budget onto YouTube. Because you don't have any data on that, or I'm sure you do actually.
Yeah.
But, so you say, all right, let me put this amount of budget on that and see what comes back.
Totally.
And I think that from a growth perspective, like that's why I really like working with growth marketers and performance marketers, is that like everything they do is like has so much measurability, except for when you get to the like brand awareness level, it's a lot harder. And that's the way that my product team works too. But it's a little bit different because there's a lot of, not everything is as measurable and measurable in the exact same way that customer acquisition is measurable, and time is a huge
gusto behind that one.
Yeah, right. And time is also a huge piece in terms of understanding impact. To your point, in healthcare, it can take a long time for you to see outcomes or see something occur. Something is very similar in the Havenly business, which is completely frustrating to us. The time it takes one of our customers to start a design project, work through the design with their designer, feel confident in their decision, because buying large amounts of furniture for a home, to furnish a home, is a really big buying decision, that it takes us a long time to make a change in the way that we service our customers, the way that we have our designers understand the customers, have our designers communicate to the customers, or a change in the way we do our room renderings or anything like that can have, from the time that we start it, those clients go into it, to the time that they feel confident in, and then the time that they buy, plus getting enough sample size within that to get a good measurable outcome to our ultimate goals of like happy customers buying stuff for their home. In that example, so we have to like design metrics around how do we know within days or weeks as opposed to months. Because if we do this change, we wait months, we essentially, and it's wrong and it's bad, it's going to take us time to fix it and change it, and now we're a quarter or two away from having made this change, and can be very detrimental to our business.
Yeah. Thanks for that. I'm going to bring us back just a little bit of, I think a lot of what we've heard is, that Havenly and Sonder might be a little bit more mature from like the journey of where you all are from a startup perspective. But if you were to come back to yourselves, whether that's at your current companies or just earlier in startups, and try to drive what that would be like that effective but simple data strategy, what would be some of those tenets or some of those things that you would think about when driving a strategy that wouldn't overcomplicate your operations or wouldn't overwhelm your teams?
So I'll go first. Okay. When I think of data strategy, I think of first understanding your business, what you're trying to achieve, and not just like I said before, grow revenue, but really the dynamics of how you do that, how you service your customers, how you acquire your customers, where you are today. Are you pre-revenue or not? So it's really just about understanding the space that you're in and what you're trying to achieve, and then asking really intelligent questions to break that down into the components that drive that. So you really have to get a really good understanding about, like, if you were to create a complete financial model of this business, every single lever that you're thinking about right now that could drive it, that you do or don't have data on, what does that look like? Because then that tells you what data you need to make your decisions. And then from there, you can start saying, how do I get this data? What are the systems? What are the ways that we collect this data? Is it manually entry on things? Is it just because you don't have a great way of automatically collecting that data for something that's important, you need to figure out how you collect that so you can make decisions with it. And then it's data collection, right? What do we implement? What technologies do we implement? What systems and processes do we implement to collect that data? And then it's about what is your current mechanism, like where you're at as a company, how many resources do you have? How do you step your way into this? How do you store that data? How do you manipulate it into the predefined metrics or multiple metrics that you can create to make your decisions? And you can kind of step your way into it. I think in general though, so like if you're a team of one startup, your answer for that is probably, I'm going to write down things into an Excel spreadsheet every single day, and this is the format I'm going to put it in, and then I have this data that I can do stuff in Excel with. That's probably your answer. As you grow and get a little bit bigger, then you're going to want to expand upon that because that's not scalable. And there's lots of different solutions out there for data collection, data storage, accessibility and insights exploration. So it really depends on the skill sets that you or your founding team have, or the small team that you've started to put together. I'm thinking like super early stage startup. But at some point along that journey, you're going to want to make it. You're gonna want to pivot from I've gone from 0 to 1. I've understood what I need to do to make a product that has some market fit that I can start scaling with, to I need to start scaling, and that's really the part that I've mostly been in. I don't have 0 to 1 experience with a group of 2 or 3 people. I came in when there was about 10 or 15 people at Havenly, and essentially what was happening there was, there were really no data systems besides our product application for our website and people using Excel. And we were essentially querying the product application for data that was in it, that was structured only for the purpose of driving the website and the product, and trying to get metrics that we wanted to drive the business. So we essentially put in place, we started a stepwise process to put in place a different system that allowed us to have a predefined model of data that allowed everyone in the business to see the exact same thing in the exact same way we decided for it to be, so that people weren't misquoting each other. I think on a daily basis I'd walk in and Lee, our CEO, would say, what were sales yesterday? And then there'd be like 5 different answers that were wildly different thrown out because everyone had their own way of doing it. And that just wasn't going to work for us, right? Like that was a key metric that nobody knew what it was. So we built that way, and I can go into more detail there, but I want to stop talking for a bit.
Thanks, Bill.
Yeah, I mean, I would certainly defer to Bill on like the structuring and building that, and I think that is a really important step as companies start to mature. I would argue, though, that at the beginning, it's less is more at a very early stage, right? And I think we do this every year when we do our annual planning, because annual planning is like a strategic reset, and you do want to be thinking about some 0 to 1 initiatives, as well as like, is the way that we thought about the business, the way that we want to, like last year, how we want to continue to do that, and do the metrics that we cared about moving last year, like are those still resonant? Most of the time, even at a very sophisticated large-scale business, you can boil it down to your like top 3 to 5 hero metrics, right? For us, it's getting new clients into care. It's retention of our existing, like clinically appropriate retention of our existing base. Probably something around the size and activity of our provider group, and client in provider NPS, right? Like, do they like what they're having here, right? And within that, there's a million sub-metrics, but a lot of those things ladder up to our mission. Our mission is about making mental and behavioral health care more accessible. So when you start there and you just say, like, what are the things that matter for us to achieve our mission and to run a good business, right? And there's like costs and other pieces you need to really be thinking about. But if we're thinking about driving revenue, I think you can start with something as simple as that, and then you can drive the rest of your business strategy from that. Like, you want to increase, for us, we want to increase the number of clients that get through what we call an episode of care, like an appropriate, number of sessions of care with their therapist or psychiatrist. All right, that's the goal. And by the way, that drives, LTV and a lot of other revenue metrics in addition to being really mission-oriented for us. Then you can break that down into a bunch of sub-metrics. Okay, are they getting into that first session? Are they getting from that first to that second session, from that second to that third? Because there's a different breakdown at each of those places. Like, not getting into the first session is like friction in our conversion funnel. Not getting to that second session might be, I don't like my therapist match. I need to see somebody different. So then you can actually sort of say, all right, what are the strategic levers, growth initiatives, whatever, that we're going to drive from that? But it all ladders back up to, like, what are the couple of metrics? If we put nothing else on a slide, if this business didn't orient to anything but these 3 things, would we be like getting to where we want to get to? And then you can kind of set your targets and things from there as well. So I think orienting around those hero metrics, and as Bill said earlier, thinking about like, what are the leading and lagging indicators for that, so you can stay current? But I think you can keep it pretty simple. And you probably can function in an Excel spreadsheet for like some decent amount of time. I had to start it for a while. We did a lot in Excel. I mean, I
still do a lot in Excel.
I still like export things into Excel.
I use a lot of other tools too, but Excel never goes away.
Yeah. So anyway, that's sort of the philosophy. I think there's like, Bill had a lot more detailed perspective on how to do it, and that's not my area of expertise. But
but I like what you're saying there, Val, because I think, from a consulting perspective, a lot of the work that I would come in and do is exactly what you mimicked of, let's get really clear on your vision and mission, let's get really clear on your strategy, and then when you start to define your KPIs or OKRs or whatever framework that you're using, ensuring that that they do trickle down throughout the organization, and that every person, again, regardless if it's a team of 0 to 1 or 15 or however many, knows that what they're doing contributes to that metric in this way, which then contributes to the strategy. So would love to talk a little bit about that, of how do you, kind of interrelate data into your culture within your organizations. Bill, I know this is something that you have a lot of passion around, and just a data-driven culture.
Yeah, I think what you just brought up a second ago is like the foundation of a data-driven culture, right? Like you need to identify and agree as a whole company what your 3 to 4, or just to put a number on it, top metrics that really, if you don't do those, your company definitely won't succeed. And so for Havenly, I would say it is like volume of design customers. It is the NPS, or a quality score of design customers, which we use one internally, which is kind of weird, but it's percent 4 stars. We have a rating metric around while you're going through the process, and basically if people don't give us the top rating, which is 4 stars in our case, then we essentially say they're not happy with their design. And the monetization of those projects too, so there's a monetization number as well. But the foundation of the strategic approach, though, is like you don't then go set off and say, all right, we're going to go move this metric up here. What are all the tactics we should do, right? Like there's like so many. That's a step removed from how you think about strategy there, and there's just one extra layer to the leading lag and indicators conversation of saying, all right, what is the insight or hypothesis that is metric oriented, that's specific and smart, where it's timely, measurable. I don't remember all the actionable. That we think will actually move that metric, and which is usually like a hypothesis about the customer behavior or some element of your business. So for example, in our case for project outcomes is we know that if we don't start this project within 14 days of the customer saying they want to start a project, that the outcomes of those projects significantly start to decline. So we basically have a metric that says what percent or actually more volume oriented of our projects are we starting within 14 days. And that is our strategy, is to get more people started within 14 days, because we know, or at least we have a hypothesis. This goes back to, is that metric still working for us? Because just because as soon as you take something that was correlative and make it your target, it might not long be correlative anymore, it might not be causal, right? So you essentially say, we think if we do this, we'll drive that. What are all the ways we can do that? And it makes you one level more specific about the tactics you put in place to go after an insight or a measurable insight about the behavior of your customers, the behavior of your business, some portion of your business model that you can be extremely focused on. And that actually really lets you prioritize all the millions of things that you could do to say, we're going to work on this strategy, which is a slice of our overall thinking. And if we really focus on that and move that metric, and you can measure and view how you're moving that metric, we think we'll actually move these ultimate metrics for our business. And then on a quarterly or however your data works, you need to go back and say, well, one, did we move that metric? And if we move that metric, did we start seeing that move the other metrics? If we didn't, is it because there's still a time lag between those? Or should we reassess whether that metric or the way we're moving that metric is actually going to be a strategic driver for our business?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I would just add on to what Bill said. One is if you don't measure it, it's really hard to manage to it. So from a cultural perspective, if you care about moving something, put it somewhere that everyone has to look at it and talk about it and think about it. For us, we do that within our culture. We do it. That's what we use like our all hands and our monthly business reviews for. And we have a set template that is a stoplight version, red, yellow, green, with the company level metrics on slide 1, and then each business owner. So I own some specific, my own specific kind of highest level metrics, right? What's my provider growth look like? Like, what is my LTV to CAC this month, like whatever else, sort of everyone does. So a combination of being really thoughtful about what is that metric, because I promise you, if you put a metric on a slide in front of the entire company and it's red, the company will start to like try to move that metric to make it green, because it's like no one wants that to be red. And then the second thing is I think it's just that repeatable, consistent conversation about the things that matter, that you're measuring, that you're moving, and the actions that you're taking to drive it. And so for us at Sonderman, the thing that we have to make sure we spend time thinking about is not just the what is it and why is it, it's what are we going to do to move it. Yep. Like what levers are we going to do between now and when we come back here next month to make something different? Because you can spend a lot of time really deeply understanding why you're missing. And if you don't put the same amount of time towards what are you going to do differently, what are you going to test to drive it, then you'll just find yourself in sort of that same position with an ever-increasing bank of knowledge as to why you're not hitting your company goals or whatever. So I do think that combination of being very consistent with putting the things that matter out front and making people focus on it and talk about it, and then being action oriented and following up. We said we were going to do this. We did it. Did it move the needle? Those are the types of things that I think can create a really data-driven culture, but keep you away from too much analysis paralysis.
I think there's like some gotchas here too, where everyone's heard of OKRs. Like, OKRs is essentially a framework to do this, but where I've seen it go wrong is when the loop of we did the thing, did it move the result is not tight enough, because then it becomes a framework for justifying a long list of tactics and to-dos that people just check off the list, and then you've essentially taken one stab at saying, here's all the things that the team is going to go do, and then you come back a month, sometimes is even too long, or a quarter later, and you say, we did all the things, but nothing happened. As opposed to like the framework really, when done right, is every cycle of we're not even completing a full tactic, but like we're working on this tactic, or we put like elements of this tactic out. Is it moving the needle? Do we need to keep doing this tactic, or should we cross it off, go to the next thing, and try again, and keep going on? Or like, what did we learn to revise the list of tactics that we're going after? Because I think that's the biggest gotcha I've had with people that think they're working in a data-driven way in this model, but they're aligning themselves on data, which is a good step one, but then they're just going out and doing the things.
Yeah, so how are you measuring the ROI behind those investments or behind those decisions when you are revisiting? It sounds like monthly, quarterly, annually.
Yeah, I mean, so my teams are weekly. Like we're meeting weekly and sometimes even more frequently. Like if I'm talking about Google search spend, that is a daily tracking. It's enough money, and then the results are immediate. But for lots of my team, it's like weekly or whatever else, and then you sort of roll that up to, maybe a group of teams, then you roll up to the company level after that. For us, when we think about the ROI, I think the biggest question that we have, especially in a world of scarce resources, and my team could go do 10 different things, is what does good look like if we do it right? Sometimes it's like, we used to have this conversion rate and now we have this conversion rate. Like, if we got it back to that, what would that mean for us, right? In dollars that we wouldn't have to go put into market. It's like a whole bunch of things, new clients that would come through. You can almost always translate it to revenue eventually. So typically, I think that's how we size the opportunity. And if you don't do that, which periodically you don't, because you just think that's a big opportunity, someone should just go do that thing, and you don't actually size it, and then you move it, and nothing actually changes that much, or turns out you didn't really actually think it through, and you can't move it because it's already at a best-in-class amount. Like if you have like a best-in-class retention, I would not spend any resources trying to move that needle up 3 or 4 or 5 percentage points. I mean, unless you really felt convicted about it, because it's like the likelihood of doing that. So I think it's that sizing, like what's the delta between where you are and where you want to be? How achievable is that? And then what's it going to take for your team to go after it? If you're in product and eng, which I'm not, but it's like they have it down to a science. It's going to be this many points. It's going to take us this many sprints. You know what I mean? So or allegedly down to a science, I should say. For my team, it's not so clear, but it is usually, okay, I can do these 3 things, but I won't be able to do this thing.
It's never that many points or that many weeks.
yeah, exactly. That's true. So that's how we think about the opportunity. And then I completely agree with Bill. If you're not actually very clear on what you're moving and what the leading indicator is, and then watching it if it actually moved and coming back to it, and that sounds simple, but that can actually be really hard for an organization. Yeah. Because it takes work. It's really fun to spin up a new initiative. Yeah. It's less fun to do the work of tracking it every day.
Well, it's also extremely demoralizing because most of the things you do aren't going to work.
Yeah, exactly. And then you're like,
oh, okay, what's the next thing?
Yes, and I think actually that's a sort of a separate operating conversation, but being able to get in the mindset of learning from what doesn't work and owning that and saying, and not feeling like it reflects on you as a business leader or something is really valuable.
Yeah, thanks for that. Let's stay there. I guess, when have you both any stories when you've had data that has made you make a big pivot, whether that's an initiative or in a strategy? I'm sure that has happened a couple times or two. So would love to hear some stories.
Trying to think of one I can share.
Tell us all your secrets.
Let's see. I think that there is maybe 2 things that come to mind. One is the types of customers that we service and acquire. As Havenly has grown, I think our mission is still for the Havenly Services business unit of our brand umbrella is still essentially democratizing interior design. We want to provide as a service for everyone. I think the sad truth of what we came to at some point is that there are a lot of customers we have that lose us money. And those are the customers that come to us with no intention to actually buy anything for their home. They use us as an inspiration tool only. They think it's fun, which is great. But like our business model is really about like making sure that you find things that you really want to buy for your home. So we did an exploration on that years ago about really which customers we're acquiring that are doing well for us and making us money, and which customers we're acquiring that are actually eating away at our bottom line because of how much it costs us to serve them compared to how much revenue they have. So it was complicated. It's not exactly like it's a multi-slice view of all of our customers, but we really went into every customer, what we could know about that customer after we've serviced them, and then made some decisions about like if we somehow didn't service these customers and service these customers, this was what would happen to our overall profitability. And then we had to back it up a little bit further to say, all right, what could we actually know at the moment of trying to acquire them? Because if we know it after the case, all right, the people that didn't buy it from us don't make us any money, and the people that do make us money, to oversimplify it. But like, what are the characteristics of those people that we could target our growth, our marketing acquisition efforts against? We could retool the way that we position our product on our website and the way we communicate it, and we could change, and we could collect some information in our onboarding or like our registration flow to like know who we should really prioritize remarketing to. I don't want to get into the dirty details of which customers we decided to keep and don't keep.
I'll give what I think are two very publicly fine examples. One is we were trying to spend some time to think about why do our clients not come back for a second or third session. And what we found pretty quickly, and this is not a surprise for anyone that knows healthcare, having an adverse billing experience makes you not want to go back and see your therapist again. So if you
the surprise bill, and
it's really hard, right? Because we don't know if you have a high deductible plan. We don't know what your copays are. We don't know if you've hit all your copays already, right? So, but if we thought or you thought that was going to be a free session, and then 2 weeks later you get your bill and it was actually $125 and that's your copay, then you might love everything about your experience, but you're not going to come back. That, for us, has been like such a key unlock to think about where do we invest technology resources, where do we make business decisions that try to solve that problem at the front end as much as we can, right? I mean, it's still healthcare, so we can't do everything. But so we're going to go and like partner with a benefits verification company that's going to give much clearer estimates to our clients at the outset of that, before that first session. We're going to speed up the process by which somebody has their session and then gets billed, which actually has a whole bunch of steps that we don't control. When does that therapist submit the claim? Like those types of things. Speed that up as much as we possibly can, and think about how do we incent that speed, so that if somebody is going to get a bill, it's not going to come after they've had 2 or 3 sessions and sort of pile up. So that has been a big, we've put a lot more engineering resources to it. So that's like a very big shift that we've made as a company because of a problem statement that was identified, through a data and insight. And how we really looked at it was literally, we were like, when do people, like what happens for people that don't come back? And then we just looked in our data, it was like, oh, they all get a bill. Oh, they all got a bill that was like bigger than what we had initially estimated. It wasn't like that. It wasn't that. It was great investigative work from the team, but it was not like rocket science. We just sort of looked at it, and then we devised a plan around it.
Was that an example of hypothesis-driven
for sure.
analysis, or we looked at stuff and then something jumped out at us?
That was more hypothesis-driven. I think like folks that know healthcare know that's likely, but we hadn't looked at it, and we had to do some data restructuring and stuff to be able to say, well, what did we tell them it was going to be? Or they had 2 bills in a row. Like, sort of, we had to like define what it meant to have an adverse billing experience and make sure we were clear on it and that type of stuff. But yeah, it was hypothesis-driven and has changed like quite a bit of the way that we invest and think about solving that problem.
Yeah. Maybe to even expand on that for a second is. when people think about data-driven, they might think that they collect the data. I'm not saying that you think this, but like they collect the data and then it will tell them something. And I think 99.9% of the time that is not true. It's actually, I need to go have a hypothesis about what data I'm going to go collect, and then and then in that data, what am I exactly looking for, and whether or not it's telling me this, or this, and then maybe I need to break it down and ask another question of it. But most of the time, where you're using data to make decisions, it is going to be hypothesis driven, and less so about like, let me just explore the data and see what comes out. And I think that obviously the more you collect data that can be reused against multiple hypotheses because you've understood all the key points of your business, the more you can continuously ask questions and ask new hypotheses of the data you've already collected. But more often than not, you run into, well, we haven't collected that data in that specific way. We need to collect that data or create a test that will collect that data in a really, really structured way to answer that question. Partly why I asked that, because I was going to be surprised if you said the other way around.
Yeah, no, I think it's great, especially you're reminding me a lot of like the scalability and complexity of a lot of the stories of what you just both shared. I'm curious, again, if you were to come back and to, kind of been in your shoes way back, what would be some of the things that you would have wanted to plan for your data complexity or as your business was growing and the earlier stages?
I'll give my simple version, and then I'll turn it over to Bill, who probably has more detailed thoughts on some of this stuff than me. But I would think a lot about how you want to democratize your data across the company. The easy answer is like everybody has access to everything and everyone self-serves. You end up in the situation that Bill mentioned where everybody defines something a little bit differently and everybody has a different perspective on what right is. So I think you can think about it when you're really early, just like who sees what and how much do you want to put parameters in place? So it's like, hey, this is the analytics approved dashboard, that like this is what revenue is. And because it's like, is it no-show claim for us? So much complexity. So I would say that's the first thing to think about is like who has access to the data and how much do you want it to be centralized within an individual or a group of people, and how much do you want to democratize it? If you can, I think the company moves much faster if more people can access data, but then you just really want to think about how do you put guardrails in place so that everybody self-serves the same accurate data with the same parameters and things like that. Yeah. But that is, I think, something I would think about pretty early, and depending on what your industry is and what the data is, and obviously thinking about the data security and confidentiality, it is really important, and you'd be surprised how much that can become not just a risk but a complexity. But I do sort of think, what's the philosophy, and how easily accessible do you want it to be for folks?
Thanks for that.
Yeah, we're not HIPAA compliant necessary, so I can imagine that's a lot harder to navigate when trying to democratize data across the company.
It's also harder to buy AdWords on, so.
Retargeting. Yeah. To cover on democratization of data, I think that there's a couple things I think about there, and I think the first. Obviously, there's what are the systems and structures and access to data. That's one thing I can cover that. I think the other thing is like who is accessing data, and I don't mean that just like who, like limited few. I mean like who are you hiring, right? Like how do you think about hiring? Because if you want to build a culture where everyone is using data and everyone has access to data to use, how you think about the process of which you vet and decide about who you're hiring needs to incorporate analytical tests to understand how they think about data, how they think about problems and hypotheses and evaluations. They don't need to be a data scientist necessarily, but I think that if you're going to democratize data across the company and make it so that they are doing the analysis first, that you can get into a rough spot with people misusing data and creating narratives that might not exist or might not be supported with more rigor. So like thinking about your hiring process and your interview process to include some elements of that. So like at Havenly, we typically try to have almost everyone at every level, obviously there's some entry levels that we don't have the same amount of rigor on, but there is a process of essentially doing a small case study or something that's relevant to your field about here's a little bit of data, go like what are you seeing here, what do you do here, so that we know that the level that we need them to operate with data, they can operate with data, so that we can actually democratize it in that way, because then access to it yields good results. From the access side of thing, I think planning from the beginning is, I mean, one thing, the reason I was kind of like, going like, what did I wish I planned? Yeah. I think that I might even say that sometimes I feel like we've overplanned, right? Like, if you track everything and you measure everything and you like put it all into a database, you just have a lot of data, right? Yep. Like you have a lot of stuff that it then takes work to make any use out of, and if you do too much of that, then you're wasting time and energy and money and resources on just maintaining that and not being focused on only the data that actually matters. I think that's maybe an overstatement a little bit, because obviously if you have really well collected data that's like fully representative of your business and your customer experiences, then you can slice and dice it a lot of different ways and continuously ask questions. But you can definitely overdo it with how much you try to achieve that, and then kind of paralyze yourself because the complexity of dealing with that data is layered on top of everything. Yeah. But I think that the planning side of that is going back to another thing I was saying before, which is fully understanding like the customer journey and the business levers and the models, and trying to like really define a flexible model that just captures the truth of interactions in a way that is as simplified as possible without losing too much information. And then you can always come back to it and be like, well, we didn't capture this component of it. Well, how do we add that back in there? Yeah. And then understand that first, and then building it into a data model that you can continually maintain, because it's essentially like your world as a business represented in data, which allows you to answer a lot of those questions on the fly. So an example of that for Havenly is we say like, what is the full journey and the interaction points between our customers and our designers? What communications happen back and forth? What feedback loops happen? Like where is time really important when this thing happened and this thing happened and this thing happened? And how would I want to slice that like what are some examples of how I'd want to understand that? And then we modeled it into a data warehouse and transformed and keep our transformations up, written in something called DBT, which is essentially like a in-warehouse transformation framework that allows us to then, when we have another thing that has evolved the way we think about our business, we can essentially build it into that same data model and not just have to like think about it from scratch from the outside, and we continue to evolve that. So I think that is the planning that we've done on it. I wish we did that the first year I started at Havenly, but that didn't exist back then.
Right. Yeah. So you're learning and growing as you go. Yeah. Thanks both. We're just about out of time, but I have a lightning question for you at the end. Then maybe we'll be able to take one question. But what's a current data strategy that you're both using to shatter your own ceiling, your growth ceiling for Havenly and for Sondermind? Again, I'm asking more secrets here, but.
There you go first.
Yeah, so I mean, one of the things for us that we're thinking a lot about is how do we, at our scale, hit the really high growth rates with really strong unit economics. So what we've been spending more time doing is like we have different like LTV to CAC ratios, lifetime value of our clients versus the cost to go acquire those clients. Really different ratios in different states where we operate. And what we want to do is have all of them be 3-to-1, 5-to-1, whatever, like where we're making way more money on every client that we acquire than like the cost to go and get them. That's how we become profitable. What we've been doing and spending meaningful time is saying, what is working? What has happened in the states where it's working? And how can we go and replicate that marketing strategy in other places? And the really interesting thing that we've found is the places where we're just deploying, a lot of Google search spend, which is kind of the bottom of the acquisition funnel. It's that demand capture for my marketers out there. It's less efficient, even though that is like one of the places where it's like money in, clients come out. You know, it's like sort of the slot machine. You can pull a little bit, and like it's very predictable, and you can track it, and you can see it day over day. So what we've moved to is a strategy where we're putting a lot more, we're sort of shifting to a lot more awareness dollars in market, thinking about the overall brand in a state that we're in, thinking about the ecosystem that we can build where Sondermind can have as strong a brand in Florida as it has in Colorado, because the underlying belief is that rising tide will lift all ships, and we'll start to have more direct search, we'll have more organic search, people will convert better because they'll have seen Sondermind before and they'll trust us. But it's a pretty big shift and departure from what we've done in the past, and it requires like meaningful dollars. So it's an interesting time, and I'm excited about kind of doing
definitely. Thanks for sharing, Val. Bill, we might have to do the short version because I think we'll get a stampede of people out there.
Yeah, very, very short version.
Yes.
For one of our business units, Interior Define, which is custom sofas, we have a strategy right now where we're acquiring leads for customers, and then nurturing them, scoring them for their propensity to buy, passing them to a sales associate in one of the 14 locations around the United States, and having them essentially like sell on those leads, which is a little bit different than a lot of way B2C works.
Yeah. Thanks for that. Well, thank you both for being here this afternoon. I want to thank everyone in the audience as well. We'll stick around to answer your question, but do want to just have a big round of applause for our two panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you all.